On the Edge of History presents Peak Performer. His mother wanted him to be a Buddhist priest, but he heard a higher calling. As the third youngest of 13 children, he had to work to help his family survive a nomadic life in the Himalayan mountains. On the day he was born, his parents were told by a Tibetan Lama that he was the reincarnation of a very wealthy man. As simple yak herders and farmers, they couldn't have been more honored. From an early age, he worked for his family. He didn't attend school, never learned to read or write. They were too poor. He simply followed the strict example of devoted service set by his brothers and sisters. The only difference between he and his siblings was his absolute love of mountain climbing. Although his family lived in the Himalayas, they had no interest in climbing the mountains. In fact, they treated the mountains as places for the gods. Their reverence for the holy place called Chomolungma, or Holy Mother, prevented them from even considering setting foot on the mountain. While still a young child, he was sent by his family to work for a Sherpa family, who traditionally worked as porters for mountain climbing expeditions. As European adventurers began climbing the Himalayas in the 1920s, Sherpas became the workhorses that carried their supplies and equipment up the mountains. Living in the high altitudes made it easier for them to work in the thin air. At 18, he moved to Darjeeling, India, to work as a Sherpa guide. His life changed forever. His first opportunity as a porter was with the British reconnaissance expedition of Mount Everest in 1935, under the supervision of Sir Eric Shipton. He impressed his employer so much that he was asked to join 3 more attempts by the British to reach the top of Mount Everest in the 1930s and 1940s. Through the years, his reputation for strategic mountain climbing and tales of courage became known far and wide. He worked his way up, gaining strength and confidence until he became the Sirdar, or foreman of the porters, for the Swiss attempt at conquering Mount Everest in 1952. The team broke the mountain climbing record by reaching an altitude of 28,215 feet, but they never reached the summit. Although the expedition didn't reach the top, the Swiss made him a climber when he considered the greatest honor had ever been paid for him. When the British made another attempt at Mount Everest the following year, among the 40 climbers selected for that expedition was Tenzing Norgay. Setting up base camp in Kathmandu in March of 1953, the group of 400 climbers included climbers, porters, and Sherpa guides, along with 10,000 pounds of equipment, food, tents, and supplies. On their way to Mount Everest, they rested at the Buddhist monastery called Tengbachi, where they acclimatized themselves for the upcoming ascent. While there, Tenzing requested a blessing from the head lama, a tradition that continues to this day. From there, the whole group traveled on foot for 300 miles, from Nepal to the bottom of Mount Everest. They started the climb on a huge ice fall, chopping at the glacier with their picks and using poles and ice ladders to make their way across crevices and up the mountain. Between April and May, the Sherpas and porters carried supplies up and down the mountain, setting up camps while progressing up to different altitude levels. With each porter carrying up to 100 pounds, the group moved slowly but surely up the mountain. Day by day, they climbed, inching their way up, fighting for visibility in the blowing snow and threatening avalanches. They marked their path with flags for others to follow. By the last week of May, months into their expedition, many men suffered from exhaustion, unable to continue in the thin air of the high altitude. Even Sherpas found it difficult to continue. Eventually, the climbing group reached 26,000 feet. To set up Camp 9 on May 24th, the final stage before attempting to reach the summit. Expedition leader John Hunt chose his most experienced climber pairs, Charles Evans and Tom Bourdillon, and New Zealander Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, to make the two planned attempts. First up was Evans and Bourdillon. Although they broke another record for highest altitude climb, their oxygen tanks malfunctioned on the way up, and they were forced to return without reaching the summit. The following day, Hunt chose Tenzing and Edmund for the second and final attempt that year. Waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, Tenzing and Edmund set off for the summit. That day, along with the equipment, they carried the knowledge that if they didn't reach the summit, a French expedition, who were already scheduled to climb the mountain the following season, would be the first to the top. They had to make it. They had to do whatever it took to reach the summit. Moving slowly up the mountain, at one point Edmund almost slipped through a crevice in the rock, but he was saved by Tenzing's quick thinking and fast response to secure him with a rope. After more than 5 grueling hours climbing slippery ice and steep rock, the two climbers reached a large flat surface that was later named the Hillary Step. A few more feet up, and they found themselves at the summit of Mount Everest at 11:30 a.m. on May 29th, 1953. The two climbers shook hands and hugged each other. For 15 minutes, Edmund took photos of the surrounding Himalayan mountains and a souvenir photo of Tenzing holding the ice axe with flags attached for Britain, India, Nepal, and the United Nations. Unfortunately, Tenzing didn't know how to work a camera, so they never got a photo of Edmund on the summit. When they returned to base camp with their amazing news, there were backslaps all around and cheers roaring up the mountainside. When asked who reached the top first, both men refused to take credit. They believed they were a team, and one couldn't have done it without the other. The two men never climbed together again, although they remained lifelong friends. They made public appearances to receive honors and tell the world about their famous climb. Edmund received a knighthood from the newly crowned Queen Elizabeth II, and Tenzing received the Order of the Star of Nepal, which is the highest honor from his country. Tenzing Norgay may not have become a Buddhist priest, but he came closer to God than most people on earth. He lived an ordinary life before history gave him a supporting role in an extraordinary event.